merci à tous et à toutes et pour l'équipe ici. Dites bonjour. Merci for vous as well. I will switch to English so I can remember what I'm talking about. This is the teams, which everything I will show tonight is work with, that's done with many people together in the different teams and sometimes between the teams. But which I'm very thankful. So each of these teams is living in the city that they work in, which means that I'm the one that has to travel, but I don't mind. But it's nice to have a place that's home when I come to the office. So I will start just with a personal story of why I'm interested in biodiversity. And this was just an example, but when I was growing up, I had this incredible experience of finding a little caterpillar and realizing it was going slow, and I decided to try to help it become a butterfly. In this case, it was a moth. And I read about and was told what to do, and it stayed in its cocoon for the whole winter and came out in spring. It was alive. It was incredible transformation. And more than that, it even found a mate, which evidently the male moth can scent the female moth from over 1 kilometer away and arrive, and they did it. So but at the same time, so that was incredible because it can fail. At the same time, this book was written, Animal Architecture. It was published in 1974, and it's something that really inspired me because I was interested in animals, in nature, but also in architecture. Another influence, very different, was my father's profession, which he was an engineer, very rational, straight lines, abstract. But he often took us to go see bridges all over the country. Bridges, the longest bridge, the tallest bridge, the widest bridge, you name it. And I got to appreciate the logic of and the legibility of structure. So these trips that we took to see bridges also exposed me to a lot of landscape. And so I think my passion for architecture is in between these things, the living, I wanted to call this lecture, I didn't put it on my slide, but I want to call it tout le vivant qui habite en ville, everything that lives in the city. So fast forward to my office in Chicago. This is the headquarters, and we've used this building to experiment with nature in the city and biodiversity in the city. So we made a rooftop with many different species, and we keep adding more and more ways for species to exist on this rooftop. When you think about a city, you don't have much space on the ground, so you really have to rely on the roof. And every year we measure the success. We do a bio-blitz. What is a bio-blitz? It's a way of taking the inventory of the different living things on the rooftop. So for over one day, or you can do it over different periods of time, but we measure how many living things there are. And the point is to learn how to better support biodiversity in the city. But it also is a way to work together, meet other people, share, and have a social connection. And so over the years, we've increased this biodiversity. We've had relationships with the museums, the researchers, ecologists, and schools. And that's a American kestrel, which was seen on our rooftop. It's incredible how much life is up there. The schools come, and sometimes we do the bio blitz together. But we've made the roof into what is known as a floristic habitat. It has increased so much in its biodiversity that it is considered a top type of habitat that exists very little in the city, but on the rooftop. We use this app called iNaturalist to log these sightings, which all of you can download. It looks like this. And you can put in things that you see in the city, and it can tell you what it is, and scientists will log on and verify that. So we've used that. Our roof is also a place for measuring. We're part of an experiment to measure bird migration over the city of Chicago. This is the little apparatus. We also, our production of honey there. We're using bee boxes. And then this was my favorite, is that we're part of an experiment to listen for bats. And we have, I guess, 4 species of bats up on this rooftop that have been heard. And this recording you can see in the blue shows them having a wild food fest, eating insects. So that means it's doing something really well, because this bat is a species that was in decline. So the roof is contributing to this biodiversity. Contrast that with Chicago in about more than 100 years ago. It really was only about transportation, industry, and humans. And it wasn't even very much about humans, really, because it's very hard to even access the water, the lake, with all of these train lines and industry. The reason why the industry was so successful in Chicago is because of these natural resources. I love this book by William Cronin called Nature's Metropolis, which talks about where all of these resources came from to support Chicago's success. And so, but the legacy of this, of course, is many Superfund sites, very Superfund. It means that it's a special category of pollution that's very difficult. And this is all the things that are left behind. So for me, Chicago was, a place that had this intriguing problems. When you think about Chicago, you think of the Burnham Plan, Daniel Burnham, 1909. He made this for the Commercial Club of Chicago. It was a plan to ameliorate the problems of industry. And in it, he drew all of the green spaces, the transportation, the agriculture, the businesses. All of these things came together in this plan and lived side by side. And if you visit Chicago today, you see the evidence of that planning. And we still use this plan today to guide our city's development. But the part that never really was imagined by Burnham is that the industry would leave. And that's what happened starting in the 60s and the 70s. And this is a map showing, you can see Chicago up in the upper right-hand side, and you can see this network of industries labeled in red and overlaid with this migration patterns of birds. So you actually have this incredible combination of leftover materials from industry, some industry still there, and abandoned railroads, animals and birds, and these incredible landscapes that are very vital to many, many birds and animals that migrate. So in 2003, so it's a long time ago, but I made this project which was about making a building like a bird would make a nest, using all the things that are left over and nearby. So it was a very early project about reusing materials. At the time, people were talking about a lot of high tech for green buildings. And this was very much more basic, using these materials to make a building. This building was going to have columns made of different kinds that you would find. It was going to have bird-safe glass. This is another problem that I discovered through this project. When birds are migrating through from South America to North America, and it happens here too in Paris, they encounter glass that they cannot see. So there are a lot of fatalities with birds and buildings. So as an architect, I want to address this. So starting back in 2003, working with glass manufacturers and building owners. It's still going on though, like this was like a year ago, over 1,000 birds were killed running into this building there was a heavy fog, and it was a night where they were migrating, and there were lights and all of those things contributed to this massive crashing into the McCormick Place. It's a building on the lakefront. And I think this is just the one day's collection of all of these birds that died that day with the building. So it really makes, it means for me, we have to do something about this. This is crazy, terrible. So for that building in 2003, we designed a kind of a porch that would be protective of the building. And it would make it possible for people to see birds and be engaged with the landscape, but protect them from crashing to the windows. And since that time, I've worked on these guidelines for different cities: New York City, San Francisco, Toronto. But in Chicago, my own city, we still don't have it. So I'm still working on my own city to adopt these guidelines. The other thing so these are just some of the things that go into my thinking about architecture. The other thing about cities are the ecology of the waterways. And I wrote this book in 2011 about the potential of the Chicago River to become something different. It was always an industrial canal, and it has a possibility to be a place for much more connection between people and water, but also habitats, and use the system of the water to help to refresh the water quality. So these are ideas that I was interested in, that led to this publication of this book, led to this construction of these different boat houses along the Chicago River. And in doing that, we give access to people to start to care about the river. So in a way, it's like building a political movement around the support for a clean river. And 10 years later, then you can see there really is a lot of change. Now the river is much more accessible. I still wouldn't swim in it. I wouldn't recommend. But people are engaged with it in ways that they never were before. And I think the boathouses, other access points that by other architects have given people a chance to see how interesting it is. And so when we talk about biodiversity in cities, a lot of times you just think about the animals themselves that are there. But the point I want to make about this idea is that the materials that we source for our buildings are also impacting biodiversity. Maybe not in the city, but wherever the material came from. So this is why it's so important to understand and really dig into where materials are sourced. Not just saying it's wood, but where exactly did that wood come from? because those have major impacts on biodiversity as well. This was a building we did with cordwood masonry. It's using log ends, almost like you would build a brick wall, but with timber. And the nice thing here is there's no processing. It's not a complex, manufactured wood, but it's very simple, very vernacular method that we used for this school. We used a white cedar, which is resistant to rot and found locally in the Michigan area, and produced something very beautiful, very part of the landscape, and very, very communal. 6 projects, very fast, because my voice, I'm just getting over a cold, and so my voice is not dependable. This project is about an addition to an art school. It's part of a campus in San Francisco that is part of the Burnham Plan for San Francisco. It is an addition to an existing building that we also used a very engaged process with students to see what they wanted to have in the school, all different kinds of art making. And here, this is a diagram showing our community neighborhoods. So all the art making was designed to be in these neighborhoods so that they could collaborate and dialogue and exchange in a more easy way than usual. So everything, all the arts classes are on the ground floor. They're designed to be connected in a microgrid so that the heat from one goes to the cooling of another. And then we use a timber frame, solar panels, etc. But this timber is sourced nearby. I really like this expression of the structure, the lateral bracing for earthquake seismic, and it's all done in wood but with steel connections. This is the old school that we connected to. And here you can see this like 2 levels. The ground floor in the building is all of those art labs. The upper floor is all the exterior spaces for students. So it's that's why we call it the double ground. This is where all the students check out tools for making, and then there's a lot of labs and all open to courtyards with natural light. One of the interesting things here is we put the corridors on the exterior of the building. And that allowed us to use less insulated space. And because it's California, the weather is beautiful, and the students just change classes in the outdoors. So we were able to really reduce our carbon footprint for that. This is some of the details of the seismic detailing. So what happens is when there's an earthquake, certain things are designed to break and other things just move together. So it's very complex. But you can see this cross bracing, the courtyards, the gardens on the roof, all for this campus environment for the students. There's one more building coming that they, so there's 3 of these pavilions all connected through this double ground. And the solar panels are also coming later, but everything is designed to be into this microgrid. This is the John Boyer Center in Paris. It's the University of Chicago. It's a place where students from the United States come to study in Paris and Europe in general. But it's also a place where faculty, researchers are here, and it's a place where connections are made between Parisian intellectual connections between Parisians and Chicagoans, with a lot of different cultural programming, and you will maybe one day be able to experience a film or some kind of performance in this building. I thought it might be interesting to talk about John Boyer, since the building is named after him. He is an incredible educator. He's the dean of the college. And what I really, he's been there for years and years. He's written so many books. If you look him up online, you will see this guy is a true scholar. But he is the one, because most of his research is in European history, he was the one that really wanted this center in Paris. And all of the donors that donated lots and lots of money to the school, they didn't want it named after themselves. They wanted it named after him, because he has been so important to the school. It's a building that was part of the Reinventing Paris and the 13th arrondissement, 13e. And it's really interesting because the whole building is built on top of the Arrière station. And you can see here all those beams that are, we have to build a building on top of this. You know, it's pretty extraordinary. It made me think of like how you have your ground is above the ground in a way, and I was thinking of like the butte Chaumont, which is a stone piece that just has green on top. And so we need to move our green spaces up to the roof. We did this together with Park architects who are, so we collaborated on the master plan. And then they did the part of the logement, and we did the university piece. It was inspired by this geology of Paris, this idea of, I love the idea of Paris being just like the limestone below is mined and brought up to the top. But it's also true in Chicago, because the Chicago region is full of limestone as well, more gray. And so the limestone that the pierre is from very close by, 40 kilometers to our site, our quarry. And we did a complete wood structure. Not complete, I will show you in a second, but the whole idea was to be bas carbone. With Park Architects, we created a kind of a dialogue between the two buildings. The building has wood expressed on the inside of the cour de l'eau, and outside is the pierre. So our idea for this was to make the campus vertical, which would be a place where you could, as a student, walk between the levels to classes and make that experience really interesting. So here you can see a section where we have the trains on the lower level, the train station, and our entrance, and then this the school, which is up above in the wood construction, and then this light well that filters light all the way down to the entry level. In construction, it's interesting because we had to, because it's on the train station, to ameliorate the vibration with these spring boxes. So basically it's concrete below the ground, a steel table, and then a wood structure after that. For the facade, I was really excited to try to think about using the French limestone, and I looked a lot at these cathedrals and the way that the flutes are made to make the columns look thinner. And so the idea here was to take these flutes and to create like almost like a brise-soleil with using these very thin stone sticks, as I call them. These were possible. We looked at several ways to make these, and they are working. They are structural in that they're supporting their gravity loads. And we ended up doing it with a layer of fiber, carbon fiber on the inside, and a layer of stone that worked together to create a hybrid structure. And there on the left, you can see the mock-up of the scale of it. And then from the corner, you can see this stone texture taking place in dialogue with the park logement. At the entryway, where we have a very small footprint at the ground level, and then you come into this very big campus vertical that takes you to the different levels. There's classrooms in there, and also little nooks and study areas, but full of light all the way up to the ceiling. And at the top floor, there's a room that's made just for having conferences, connections, films, performances, events, with beautiful light and high ceilings. That I think is one of my favorite spaces in there. So that's the material source that is very close by, that is important for biodiversity in those places. And now I want to talk about the Kresge College, which is another California project, but one that is an incredible, beautiful coastal redwood forest itself. Here at Kresge, this is Santa Cruz, so it's near the coast, near Monterey. There's a specific kind of redwoods there that they grow in families, so they're related to each other. So if you kill one redwood tree, you're actually it's hurting the family. So we had to be very careful with an arborist, work very carefully to find a footprint for the buildings to not disturb these trees. The other animals there, this is a school where they study biodiversity, they study ecology, and one of the funny things is their mascot for the sports team is a banana slug. Very scary. But what's really interesting is that the original campus was designed by Charles Moore. Does anyone know who Charles Moore is? Thank you. Two people. He was an architect that very interesting, worked throughout the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s. He was a postmodernist. And you can see him here. He's at the table, and they had this idea for the school that it would be designed in a democratic way. And so he held these conferences, and there's like a radio show going on there where they had people calling in and saying what they wanted. And it was supposed to be designed from the inside out. So even the school, when it started, the students and the professors were in the same committees, and the students could overrule the professors. So it was pretty radical at the time. When we came in to work on it, of course, we wanted to work with the students. And we had these town hall meetings throughout the process to get their input. And they were very engaged students, and it was an incredible process. So you can see here the original campus. It's a very hilly area, and it was not accessible for handicapped people, for wheelchairs. So we had to also fix parts of this campus, renovate parts of this campus, and also add the three bigger buildings on the left are the new dorms, and the bigger building at the top is a new classroom building. And then the other parts we renovated and brought them up to code with ADA. That's him, Charles Moore. I mean, I never met him. But I didn't even think I liked his work until we started doing this project. So it's a way of like collaborating with someone asynchronously. He wasn't there, but you're trying to see what his thoughts were. What he did was he created this almost like an Italian hill town in the middle of this sequoia forest. And the outside of it was painted like, it was very cheaply made, like from the 70s, but it was painted rust colored, and the inside was all white, like this. So, and inside was this kind of like Italian hill town street. There's this nice postmodern touches everywhere with color and, pop graphics. These are some of the housing that they made. And so our job, again, was to try to very carefully get in between these redwood families and connect back to his work, connect all the pathways and everything to each other. Again, we were working with timber construction, concrete on the ground floor. But this is a seismic area as well. Student areas, common areas on the ground floor, and residence halls above. And we made these big portals that are seen between the frames of Charles Moore's campus. So as you arrive, you see them. This, you can see the ground floor common areas and the upper levels. So this is using a wood siding as well that's will age, but it's an autoclave treated wood siding, treated with heat so that it will not deteriorate. And then you can see the glass. This is a student lounge. And on the glass, you can see these. This is the ceramic frit for bird protection. But we used all the different animals in the forest, including the banana slug is in there somewhere. And the students love this part. But that is what you need to do. And you can see it's quite invisible when you're step back from it. So it's not like anything that's going to hurt the architecture. So I don't know why more architects don't engage with this practice. And the academic building is much more fluid and curvilinear. It's got classrooms and auditoriums in it. We used a strategy that was kind of like these mushrooms that grow on the trees, that go down the trees. It's kind of like these lobes that come out of the plan and step down the hill. These are my hand drawings of the plans. And as you can see how it developed. So the circulation is along the main auditorium, and then you have these other lobes that kind of step down the hill in different areas with lots of indoor-outdoor connectivity. This was also all done in wood construction. In California, it's much easier to do this, and keeps the carbon footprint very low. So as you approach the college, you come across this bridge, which we also made accessible, handicap accessible, in a campus that's very much with a lot of different levels. And you approach the academic building and then go into the Hilltown Street. So here's the front of the academic building. Here's some of the inside of it as you navigate the levels, and the classrooms with views out to the redwood forest from inside the classroom. I just want to go back and study here again, I think. Okay, so that was the first part, just to talk about the materiality, and it was about how important it is for biodiversity, not only in the city, but also what materials you use to put in any building. And now this part I want to talk about some buildings that I call grafts. So it's from a book that I recently wrote called The Art of Grafting, the l'art de graffer en architecture. It's about adding capacity to existing buildings and trying to use new language to open up more possibilities for that. If you look at the most effective ways of reducing carbon, like the one at the upper right, delay the building demolition. that's true. And then the second one down is increase the capacity, increase the intensity of use. So that means we can't just preserve the buildings and reuse them as is. If we really want to save carbon, we also have to kind of increase the use of the building, make it open longer 24/7, or add to those buildings. So this is what the grafting book came about, because I was trying to think about new ways we could talk about these kinds of additions to expand beyond preservation, reuse, adaptation. But what is grafting? It's an ancient practice that takes an old plant and joins a new plant on it, taking advantages of both. So you have like resistance to disease in the old plant, and the new plant might have tastier fruit. So this is a way to think about how we combine old and new. There's also a part in the book about urban environments, and this first project is one that I included in the urban environments because it's really about the whole city. It's called the Beloit College Powerhouse. I just realized I have a lot of colleges in this presentation. But this was a coal-burning power plant in Beloit, Wisconsin, which is in the north in the United States. And it started out, it was on a river, so it was using this dam, and it was burning coal to produce power for this small little college you can see up on the hill, and also an industrial town across the river. And over time, so it was such a central thing to have this power plant. And it grew over time, adding on a turbine hall in the 1930s. And you can kind of see the evolution of this power plant, just each time adding on a new chunk and adding on new capacity to it over time. So in 2013, the powerhouse was kind of closed, and it was going to be too expensive to bring it up to the code, and the power company decided to sell it to the college nearby, I think for like $1, because they just wanted to get rid of it. And this is what it looked like at the time. Those machines on the side were scrubbers to make the air cleaner coming out, but everybody knew this was a very dirty power plant. And inside, you could see this big turbine hall. Those are the coal hoppers. They would load the coal into the roof and drop it down. And there are parts of it that were really, open to the weather and probably wouldn't survive long unless something happened. And so the school bought this building and hired us to help transform it into a new place for recreation, health, and social connection. It's so ironic, but I loved it as a challenge. So we added a big field house for sports, and then created the student union and made a pedestrian bridge over to the campus on the hill. So this whole building starts to become a way to connect things instead of a way to separate things. We used river water for the heat exchange and take advantage of as much solar hot water as we could for this use. But I mean, the biggest green thing about it is reusing it in general. If you look at this drawing, you can see what we tried to do with this running track is to bind all the different uses together through a running track that's hanging from the trusses of the ceiling. And then this important part is really connecting the pedestrians along the riverfront, which they were not able to do previously. So here there's the new boardwalk that allows the public to move past this building, which before was a kind of a very big blockade. Here's our bridge connecting to the campus. So people can come across this bridge, and there's kind of a busy road below, and they can take the elevators down, but anyone can take it. It's public. Anybody can use this as a means to get from the high elevation to the low elevation. There's also a stair. This is right inside the building, so it's very obvious how to move. And in the turbine hall, you can see the track wrapping through, connecting the volumes. This is where the racing track runs through the field house. And you can see on the right there how it pokes in. And this is the main turbine hall, which becomes a gym and a cafe area and lounge. And then, of course, in the first building, we put the competitive pool inside. So that was interesting. So overall, it really is now an active building. It's participating in the city, both the town and gown, as they say, the college and the town. And it's really in heavy use and has been much appreciated in this context, and the building that would not normally be reused. Okay, then the second grafting project is the Arkansas Museum of Fine Art in Little Rock, Arkansas. And this is a building that it's more like it was a accumulation of many different buildings over time, and very ugly, I guess you could say, very closed to the outside. And the museum wanted to, it was kind of, had this theater and it had some classrooms, which were nice because it made it a place that was a community-centric. Only people just didn't know how to get in this building, and it was not very welcoming. So in this is the state of the building when we came into the competition. You can see all the different editions. I think there was 8 different editions. And you could see this, the oldest building, the 1937 building in the middle. And it was buried inside the whole assembly of buildings. So our idea here, that's what that building originally looked like. Our idea was to just understand all these different systems, 8 different mechanical systems, 8 different structural systems, and try to make sense out of this and reorient this building so that it would work. So the point is you always have to start with what you have, start with what's there, kind of like the nest in the very beginning. You use what you have. Here we found what was needed was really an axis kind of orienting people north to south and to kind of liberate the older building, 1937 building. So these are the sketches of how that could work, and later on how it is perceived today. So this is the front on the right where you arrive at the north. There's a kind of a drop-off area and a courtyard behind this volume that opens up the original building. And on the south, on the left, you can see the big open terraces to the outside. So as you arrive in the courtyard, you're surrounded by this cultural living room, like giving people things to do besides just the galleries. And then when you can turn around and you see the original building, 1937 building, which is now the new entrance. And there's an axis that connects you from the, 2 ends. So completely changing this building from being interior focused to being a connection to the outdoors. And every room really has now windows and connections to outdoor spaces. There's a theater, there's a restaurant, and then there are galleries. This was the one chance we had to put galleries to load the floor that was already there with another whole level of galleries. And we did this diagonal kind of cut through the galleries to take you to a window, which is a special installation space that people can see from outside and like to go from the inside. But now it's really like a lot of their programs are flowing from inside to outside and in new ways that they didn't even imagine. So it was taking something that was already there and just doing kind of one significant move that transformed the whole building. That's the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts. This is a building that opened like 2 years ago, about this time of year. It's an addition to the American Museum of Natural History in New York, called the Gilder Center for Science, Education, and Innovation. So it's a new wing onto an old building. The old building, which you can see on the left, is really, again, another assembly of buildings, many buildings. And we were asked to put a new wing onto this building, which had many galleries. If you look at the old galleries, they were very much in the traditional natural history gallery with cases and skeletons, fossils. But what we learned was that, they actually have so many other programs there, like field work programs in the summer. They actually go look for fossils. They have researchers who are working on DNA things and taking the collection and finding strands of DNA in pieces that are very old that they never thought would be able to give more information, but they still keep giving. And then they have many programs, and a big part of their mission is education, like in the lower right-hand side. And so they wanted a new wing that would bring all these pieces together, like not have one wing for education and one wing for space and one wing for something else. Like, how do you show that the collections are key to the education and the research, the ongoing research? So in their master plan, it was a very simple 4-square building that was going to be built there. And they build it, though, very piecemeal. And as soon as they started building, they started not following the master plan. So this sounds like a familiar story now. But they started to fill in the courtyards. You can see in 1924 in this picture, under construction is the main entrance that you would know today on Central Park West. And that's the Theodore Roosevelt entrance. And our entrance is on the exact opposite side of it on Columbus Avenue on the right. And the center is a theater. And so this is now looking at it from Columbus. And how do you intervene in a place like this where there's so many different parts and pieces, and it's New York? Everybody has an opinion. So, but what's interesting about this building is that it's one of the few buildings in New York that's on an axis. It is on the 79th Street axis. Most buildings are in a block, and the streets go on forever if you know Manhattan. But here you can be inside the building and be looking down the axis. There's this famous term called Manhattan Henge, and it's the phenomena that happens when the sun goes down or comes up down one of the big boulevards that you can see that are going not exactly east and west, but on this slightly tilted axis. So it's a big thing. They announce when it's happening, and people go out and take pictures, and it's quite a thing. But the whole term, Manhattan Henge, it was coined by one of the science researchers at the Museum of Natural History, who is the astrophysicist. So that was kind of inspiring, because if you think about it, our building would have the chance of creating an axis down this 79th Street that you could view the Manhattan Hedge from. So our project was really about connecting into what was already there. They had, like I said, not followed the master plan, so we had to kind of connect the pieces, but to clarify the circulation and make it more legible so that it could live, so that it could flow. And that was really the goal. So this was the first sketch for this project, which was, the idea of like, could we make a landscape that's a landscape for discovering science and nature, but on axis with the roads. So this canyons kind of became a thing that we were exploring because something about them makes you want to discover more. When you think about these types of landscapes, they're about flow and they're about discovery. So if we could try to harness that, we could make a place that people would want to study science and nature and believe in science and believe in nature, which is not always apparent in my country. This shows very well that the blue model was not really doing it very well, and we also had some digital models that were just not really capturing the uniqueness of these landscapes. But landscapes they're so varied, they have possibility, they're human scale too. So how could we make the space that really accommodates people, for them to sit down in the museum, for them to look in holes? And so the desire was to get this kind of very organic interior space. One of the methods that we used, being in Chicago where it's so cold, we could carve ice outside on our patio with a blowtorch. And we would experiment to see, what these analog materials could give us. How could they be more interesting? So we worked a lot with different mediums. And we landed on this idea of a structure. So you could see the section, the structure inside actually is doing the work of supporting the floors on either side of it and creating this canyon-like space to bring light down into the main entry space. I should say that whenever you do this reuse, you have these constraints. The constraints here are where the columns could land. So what's inside, and you'll never see it like this, but there's a shape inside that is a structure that all the floors come into, and it lands on the columns down below. And you can see in this model how the arching structure works to help create the space. Behind the structure and the atrium, there's a collections core that shows all the collections of the museum stored, and how people work with those collections. But there's also collections themselves, and there's also classrooms. This is a test trying this mock-up of shotcrete, like how to build this structure that has so many different formal qualities, but we would never be able to build the formwork. It would be too expensive, let's say, to build unique formwork, and it would be a waste if you threw away all this formwork. So we went to this method of shotcrete, where you are designing the reinforcing behind the concrete and shooting the concrete into it, and then it's kind of almost hand finished into the shape. And we discovered this down in the tunnels of Manhattan. This is the way that the subway tunnels are built. So that's how we got the clue to explore this. And what's really cool about the construction was you couldn't see anything during the construction because it was all scaffolding, and then you could only see it when they started to pull off. So it started from the top down instead of from the bottom up. That was weird. But there's so many interesting places in the museum, lots of places to sit down, benches, places to have overlooks in this atrium, which is not actually very big, even though it seems big. The collections core is visible. These are connections into some of the exhibits. This is a live butterfly exhibit. But there's just a lot of, it's a really interesting blend between being like digitally made, but being handmade also, which I really loved. And Anna, who's sitting here, who was a project architect, had to check every inch of this building through the whole process. Then you have the live exhibits of live butterflies. So it's like a kind of a new idea of what is science education. It's not looking into the glass cases anymore. It's like you really are with the butterflies. You're mingling with the insects. Sometimes they land on you. And then there's an exhibit on insects. It was the first time that they were able to show their insect collections, but also they made this incredible exhibit which has live leafcutter ants inside of it on the lower left. And then these are their nests. So they go up over a bridge and then they start creating nests in these glass balls that you can actually see, because normally that would be like below ground. So it's really giving people a sense of, what these ant colonies are like. What I like about these are, look, everyone's working and they're just getting along and they're doing their fair share, and the small ones and big ones, and they work together. I wish we could do that more as a society. Anyway, these are new ways to exhibit. It's really, the intention is to get people excited about sciences and nature. And then there's library that has all their collections. There's a theater. I like this. You can see into the collections core where people are working on some of these collections. I like the library a lot, though, because it's really open to the public, and people could go in there and see like the important books that they had. And they could work in there, and it's free to stay there and work. And then there's classrooms. I think there's about 18 classrooms total where kids are exploring things, and the future scientists and future researchers are getting excited. Just a few words about the facade. Someone said, oh, this building doesn't look anything like the original building, but like I said, there's 26 original buildings. We chose to relate to the opposite side, which is the Theodore Roosevelt entry on Central Park West, and because we're on axis with that. So we used a stone, the same stone, even the same quarry as the original Theodore Roosevelt building, and respected a lot of and dialogue with the other buildings that are made in different eras by different architects. The facade itself, as the shotcrete comes out, it is clad with stone for the exterior. And this is the quarry where the original stone was harvested, and it's in Massachusetts, so not too far away. And then we have these layers of like the bedding layers and rock. So here's a picture during construction where the shotcrete is on the outside, and you can see how it connects to the building next door. And then the insulation, and then the cladding goes on over that. And so up close, this has a real texture to it. You can see the stone in the different layers, and it really works with the curves. I mean, this is the other thing, is like the other older building is also curved, by the way, over there on the corner. But we passed our Historic Preservation Committee with 100% approval for this building. So it was really looked over carefully. and we had comments, and we worked through it to bring this new piece of architecture into New York City, and in a very important historical place. Renovated a bit of the outdoors as well, and I'm really glad that that tree survived, because I was very worried. But we saved a lot of, there were many of the trees saved as we pulled this building back as far as we could into the original. And that's what it looks like. Okay, so to close, I just wanted to just a light touch on the Venice Biennale this year. If you have a chance to go, we have a project that I want to tell you about. The Biennale is called Intelligence, which I'm sure you all know, but it's about natural, artificial, and collective. And so this is Carlo Ratti, and he was the curator this year. And he really challenged, with his brief, challenged people to think about how can we adapt and live in the future city, adapt to climate change, adapt our cities so that they can survive, and using artificial and collective intelligence as well. And it made us think of, what we've been doing on our rooftop about using these citizen science apps and using the intelligence of the science community to help identify species on our rooftop. Is there some way we could make our cities more accommodating and more welcoming to a wider biodiversity? So we thought, how can we build people's interest in this? Hopefully you're interested by now in wildlife, but you probably already were, but now you can contribute into the science by seeing and recording the species that you see around. So we thought, why don't we try to create a BioBlitz around Venice? And so we set up the project with its perimeter. It's called the Biennale BioBlitz. So if you are on iNaturalist, you can find it. And it would be like to do the first survey of all the things that are already in Venice. And you think of Venice, I always think, it's just such a stone mineral city. But there's actually a lot of things that, of course, live there besides humans. So this is our project area. And so if you use the iNaturalist app, anytime we are in this project area, your observations will go into this project. So this is really a project about what animals, plants, and insects live in the Biennale area. So we started this out with a couple of team members that went to install our pieces there and started to, gather up some observations. Of course, plants are pretty easy to photograph, or insects are like harder, and birds are harder yet with an iPhone. But we started to find a lot of diversity there, interestingly. So when you are on that app, you have your profile, so you can see which ones you put in, what ones other people put in. And then what happens is, just going back, if it's a research grade observation, in other words, a very good photograph, then it can be verified by a scientist and by AI. So and to be research grade, it has to have at least 2 verifications. So then to put some kind of exhibit in this building, we were thinking of, how could we expand these habitats to our architecture? I mean, animals are already here, but why are the orders of architecture only based on the human proportions? We can start to have fun with different aspects of classical architecture in a city like Venice. So if the Vitruvian man is the proportions of architecture, how could we bring these living orders, other living orders, into that dialogue? So we had scientific advisors for this, both people that knew the iNaturalist app part, ecologists, but other people that specialize on animals that are in Venice that are maybe declining or maybe just because of lack of habitat or invasive species that are coming in and pushing them out. So these were all our advisors. And we started thinking about cavity-dwelling birds, there are a number of them, but the common swift, you have it here in Paris too, but they like to live inside a little hole, usually in a tree, but there's no more trees, so how can we have holes in our architecture? And then there's also the Eurasian tree creeper, the great tit, the Eurasian nuthatch, tree sparrows, and the blue tit. So swifts are interesting because there's actually a house that some people in England have already made that can put into a brick wall. But these are some of the requirements for the habitat. You know, it's like designing for humans. We have our requirements, and so do the animals. So instead of the classical fluted columns, what if we could make a column that had cavity-dwelling nests on it? So this is kind of the installation piece, and this is the final piece. In order to protect the columns in the corderie, we used cord, rope, to wrap the columns so that we could mount these houses on there. And you could see there's different sizes for the swifts and the tree keepers, and then there's some other pieces that are for wall lizards and other creatures that like to live on surfaces. Then we had this client, this is another client, the solitary bee. You might have seen these kind of habitats. I've seen one in Paris, and but usually they're built into like a faux house with like exposed timber and everything. So we thought, why don't we try making one that is more like a bee hotel that is related to this entablature. A lot of times on the entablature you have these shapes of pine cones. So we use the same things that are already known, which are these bamboo tubes. But we found out in the research that the solitary bees actually use color to identify their homes. So that was fun. So we started to create colorful ends on these tubes. That's us working in the office. And then we created this hanging pendant, which is like the fanciest bee hotel ever, probably. but imagine like if this would be hanging over a garden somewhere. It's just another piece of architecture that supports a biodiversity in the city, but it's like also beautiful, and it's something that people can appreciate as well. And then our last client was the bat. This particular bat, who's a common noctule, who lives in Venice. Actually, probably lives in the building of the Arsenale. And here we looked at what a column capital could be that could be a bat capital. So the idea was just to create, these are the specific things you need for bats, and to make a wooden bat habitat that could be mounted on a pilaster or a column, look like that. We had the wildlife videos of those animals that we were representing in a slowed down black and white video, which was really interesting because you can really see their movements and connect to them. So the point of this installation is saying, like, maybe there's creativity we can do to help support biodiversity within our cities. And then this is just pictures from the actual BioBlitz that we did with the architects and visitors, and went out throughout the city. So at the end of the Biennale, we had 305 observations, 139 different species. You can see there's a lot of things living there right on the water's edge like that. That was a good source. So to conclude, please join our project, and if you're in Venice up until November 23rd, and then this is going to, we need to take this to the next level to support biodiversities in our cities, but also where our materials and our buildings come from. Thank you.